So, Yassin al-Haj Saleh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for Kalam podcast.
Thank you, Edgar, for pronouncing my name the right way.
I'm
And
sure.
happy to be with you.
Thank you very much. So, Yassin, we've met once or twice over the years in various literary festivals and conferences, and I got in touch with my sister Sarah, who you know very well, and just a few days after Assad fell. 2 weeks ago or something like that, and you said you were at the time in Paris and you were celebrating, you were drinking arak with your friends, celebrating the fall of Assad. Do you feel the same way today? You were sort of cautiously optimistic. Obviously, you said there might be some issues ahead, but you were cautiously saying that you were glad about the developments. Do you feel the same way now, like 2 weeks later?
Yeah, of course, of course. 1 million complex issues ahead for
Sure.
sure. And still, it is a glorious ending of a despicable, infamous criminal chapter, a very long chapter, very a long nightmare for 54 years and actually 61 years
Mm.
the Ba'ath party rule in Syria. So this ending is a categorical imperative. It should happen.
Yeah.
Whatever that comes after. What will come after is most probably 100% certain that there will be so many uh, problems, crises, struggles, difficulties, hardship. 90% of the population are under poverty line. The first thing, the moment Bashar al-Assad stopped bombing in Syria and his protectors, Israel occupied more Syrian lands and bombed in Syria.
Mm.
This time, national Syrian assets, capacities, and military capacities of the Syrian army, which has been weakened for in the course of 13 years, almost 14 years of struggle. So there's a brutal, extremely brutal regional environment. The international environment is not very better. So the challenges are big. I mean, on every level, economy, education, security, tensions between communities.
Mm.
Syria a, is a diverse society with many ethnicities, many religions, and confessional communities. And it was the mission of the regime is to spread seeds of discord between them.
Yeah.
For so long years, it was like a colonial power dividing, ruling through divisions, through spreading fear and distrust among communities. So these problems are there. The problems of regional environment with Israel, the Thug, the regional Thug, and with the Emirati, the basis of reactionarism and counter-revolution in the region, and the Sisi regime. And so the challenges are very big. And without international support, I mean, so far we haven't seen threats or big problems from the international. I guess they are still feeling their ways to
Yeah.
how to come to terms with the change that happened in 11 days. What proved to be impossible in 13 years and 9 months. So it's a miracle, and nobody, no international or local or whatever, expected to this to be achieved, and no one was prepared for it, ourselves included. I mean, no one, no, 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 no. It's unbelievable. It
Yeah.
is completely unbelievable, and what makes it even more unbelievable that without big losses, We were afraid of massacres. We were afraid of revenges. We were afraid of destruction. Especially, I was afraid that there would be a big battle and victims and destruction in Homs, then in Damascus.
Mm.
Nothing, almost nothing. And there have been some violations, but quite minimal. And so far, the people who seized power in a way are acting responsibly, which is great, which gives hope to many Syrians. Besides, it is a Syrian versus Syrian thing.
Mm.
In the course of our struggle in almost 14 years, the national setting of this struggle collapsed progressively, starting from the second half of 2012, a year and 4 or 5 months after the beginning of the Syrian revolution. But for some reason they didn't put their weight, and the regime forces collapsed in a very um, evaporated, lightly
Yeah.
evaporated. Um, this adds another challenge on another level, but it saved the country from more destruction.
Yeah. So, you mentioned quite a few different things, and I want to get into all of them, including Israel's role and the other regional actors in the new Syria, whatever that's going to be. But I wanted to rewind a little bit and talk about your experiences in Assad, Syria, and even before. But first, I'd like to address the fact that your wife Samira Khalil has been disappeared for more than 10 years, and you were recently in Paris to attend a kind of memorial service or a kind of award service, right, for her. Can you tell me a little bit about her case and what the fall of Assad would mean or not mean for that?
Well, it is more than 11 years, 11 years and 10 and 12 days now, not 10 years, not only 10 years. And
Yeah.
we know we have credible information that Samira, along with Razan Zaytouna, Wael Hamada, Razan's husband, and Nadhim Hammadi, a lawyer and human rights activist, and a poet as well, were taken by Jaysh al Islam. Jaysh al Islam was the dominant power in Douma at that time, and they have thuggish thing about them.
Mm.
Islamism in Syria uh, showed monstrous transformation starting from 2013, around 2013, and for years they were mon they monst monsters do monstrosities, and they did, and taking, abducting and disappearing Samira, Razan, and Wael and another for 11 years and days, while all the time denying it as this. Though of course we have very powerful circumstantial evidence that they did it. Um, so I'm afraid what the release of prisoners from has no, I mean, we know that Samira and others were taken by Jaysh al Islam, not by the regime. And
Yeah.
Jaysh al Islam were displaced from Douma in April 2018. And they were in the northern part of the country. They started to be mercenaries for Turkey.
Mm.
And now they are back in Douma. Um, there's a monster there, and um, and I want to see it paying for its crimes. I'll be in Syria before the end of this year, and this is one of my priorities. Um, I'm only a writer. I am not a politician. Or I am not a militia guy or something. But I want to see a measure of justice for my disappeared woman and my friends.
Yeah.
The Syrian justice, first of all, or solely Syrian justice. I mean, I hope there'll be a measure of justice. And it is one element in a huge agenda for achieving some justice for Syrians uh, who were brutalized by the regime and dehumanized for very long years.
Mm.
And many of them were brutalized and dehumanized by Islamic Islamist monsters. HTS itself has developed from a monster to a more humane, so to speak, power. They are acting responsibly, they are showing moderateness. Of course, it is open to debate if this is irreversible
Mm.
thing. Of course, it's open to debate, and it should be open to debate, to be honest. But this doesn't apply to Daesh. This doesn't apply to Jaysh al Islam.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd like to know the full truth about the fate of my wife and friends, and that the culprits, and we know them by names, we know four names involved directly in this, should be held accountable.
Yeah. I truly hope that they will be. Do you know anything about HTS? Because obviously Jawlani, who's the leader of HTS, his career began with Daesh. Do you know about any? Have they said anything about their relationship towards whatever is left of Daesh and whatever is left of Jaysh al Islam? Have you heard anything about their willingness to seek justice for these crimes committed by Islamist militias like Daesh and Jaysh al-Islam?
I don't want justice from them. I want justice from the public judicial
Mm.
system in Syria. I hope that they will be positive about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it is not that they do it themselves. What I know is that they are enemies of both Daesh and Jaysh al Islam. Um, actually, Jaysh al Islam was attacking them, attacking HTS all the time.
mm,
And Julani said, yeah, spoke very negatively about Daesh. I don't know. I have never heard him saying anything about Jaysh al-Islam. But I guess there will be tensions related to this, Jaysh al-Islam, because they are close to Damascus and Douma.
yeah,
And some of these guys are uh, very, I would say, very insidious criminals. So I hope the plan to disarm all militias that are not under the control of the defense ministry uh, will go smoothly, because I know I have information that Jaysh al-Islam doesn't want to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, In the process of doing this podcast, we started it in late March of this year, and surprisingly, we haven't received, and it's been mainly about Palestine. That's kind of why we started it, reporting on the genocide in Gaza and about the history of the Palestinian struggle. And now, because of events in Syria, we're obviously shifting and doing a series on what's going on in Syria and the history of Syria. And surprisingly, when we're doing the episodes about Palestine, we I was surprised that we didn't receive a lot too much pushback or criticism, given like the controversial nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or whatever you want to call it. But now, while doing episodes about Syria and while posting on social media about what's happening in Syria, this is where I've experienced the largest degree of polemics, where a lot of people who would claim to be leftists or anti-imperialists or pro-Palestinian are kind of almost mourning the fall of Assad because they consider him to be some kind of, anti-imperialist champion and his relationship with Iran and Hezbollah, who are fighting against Israel. So I think it's helpful to speak with someone who lived under Assad's rule, someone who is not, what many, anti-imperialists, quote unquote, tanky people would call, like pro-Israeli or something. So could you tell us a little bit about what it was like living under Assad? Because you spent a significant time of your life in jail because of you belong to a political group. So what was life under Assad like, and what was the process that led to your being jailed?
First of all, allow me to say something about these leftist comrades.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are thick layers of ignorance and arrogance in there, because they don't know anything about the country. They cannot say one single useful, meaningful sentence about Syria. And maybe, I am not sure if they can say a few meaningful sentences about their own country and about imperialism. They're, they are sticking to the uh, paradigms of Cold War.
Yeah.
They are still there. Uh, I mean, it is really, it is a rare example of how how so many people have put themselves in an extremely unethical, extremely ignorant, extremely oversimplistic, and they found themselves with the extreme right in Europe and in the West supporting a thuggish regime who gassed its people, who organized a death industry in the country, who's been ruling the country, who's, uh, whose a new sultanic rule. The republic was transformed into a hereditary property where the state was privatized.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something very archaic, outdated, and uh, decomposing in the thought, in the political thought of those leftists. Now, I was a communist opposing the regime. Um, we thought as communists that we are of course, defenders of justice and freedom and rights of our people. And we were critical. I was a teenager at the time. I'm talking about late 1970s. So I cannot pretend to have personal views about any of these issues. But at that time, our group was quite critical to the Soviet Union hegemonic
Mm.
uh, dealings with Eastern Europe and with other communist parties in the world. And we defended the idea of autonomy, that we are autonomous and we decide what is right and what is wrong for our own cause. It's not that the Soviet Union tells us this is the right thing to do about the Assad regime. This is the right thing to do about Palestine. This is no, 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 no. We know far better. And it is us who theorize, who conceptualize, and who write down our programs, our political programs. We didn't have time, actually. We were taken, all of us, to jail and tortured. And so the party, and it is not the only party, but there was another communist party in Syria that was dealt with the same way.
Mm.
Most of the members were arrested, tortured. And so these two political parties, along with many others, by the way, were politicized, were killed politically,
Yeah.
completely killed politically. And people like me, we were nobodies, actually. Nobodies completely. I mean, mostly university students, quite young. I was less than 20 uh, and would spend 15 years or 16 years in my case.
Yeah.
So, so this was the thing. I mean, up to the fall of the regime, I have never been able to write one article in any newspaper, in any Syrian newspaper, or
Yeah.
my books will be there available for Syrians. And most of my work is about Syria, about my country.
Sure.
I feel actually, I feel a bit of pride that we, up to maybe 10 years ago, there were no books about Syria by Syrians, books or essays. Now there is maybe not a big library, a decent one, and writing about Syria and representations of Syria um, cannot pass now as they were passing in the past when we were not there.
Yeah.
There had been up to recently and up to today, up to this time. In fact, much epistemological violence perpetrated against us, and this top-down anti-imperialism is one of them.
Yeah.
They know very well that they will not be blamed epistemologically. They will not be held accountable that you are wrong and you are just stupid and you don't have any information and you don't even feel. So everybody has the chance to say whatever he or she wants to say about Syria because the Syrians were not there. And why
Yeah.
Syrians were not there? Because they've been ruled for 54 years by a very thuggish regime and 61 years by one party system, very brutal, very corrupt, and very sectarian.
Yeah.
Extremely sectarian. And do they consider Iran and Hezbollah liberators? Iran is a sub-imperialist power, like Turkey and like Israel. Israel is even more thuggish. Iran and Israel are far more thuggish and brutal.
Yeah.
So, what was there? What is there emancipatory about Iran? Occupation power in Syria with an edge of sectarianism, with a lot of sectarianism, and importing from the past hatreds and issues that many reasonable people thought that they should be left in the past. Please,
Yeah.
something happened 1,300 years or 400 years. So to put it in front of our faces all the time, and with the same pretext of the Crusaders 1,000 years ago to protect the shrines and to protect the
Sure.
of the Shia martyrs or whatever. This is this is the logic of the Crusaders.
Yeah.
Just one, and or to protect the supply line of Hezbollah from Iran. Sorry, there's a country, there's society, there are people,
Yeah.
there are memory. It reminds me of the British Empire
Hmm.
controlling Suez Canal and forced to occupy Egypt to protect its
Yeah.
properties in India. So it is a colonial logic without even realizing it, without even thinking of it, as if Syrian doesn't have any agency,
Yeah.
even to say, well, this is our country and forgive us. It is
Yeah.
a supply line.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. Every time I talk about this or write about it, and I've written 3 or 4 times about. I feel really that how can such a thing exist in the world?
Yeah.
These layers of ignorance and of unfeeling responses to one of the greatest tragedies in the century and one of the biggest, the most reactionary country in the world.
Yeah.
Sorry, the most reactionary country in the Arab world.
Yeah.
Of course, this comes to the ears of our leftists comrades as a heresy because they think that no, Saudi Arabia is the most reactionary.
Yeah.
Maybe Emirates, Gulf states. No, no, extremely mistaken. Saudi Arabia, in the last, it is not to say anything good about Saudi Arabia, and in my writings in Arabic, I am quite critical in Arabic, not in English.
Mm.
In Arabic, which is more effective when you
Of
talk
course.
about Saudi Arabia or Egypt
Yeah.
or Emirates or but there the dynasty, the Saudi dynasty, and the country, the modern Saudi Arabia, were formed almost at the same time. This applies to Emirates. This applies to Kuwait, Al
Yeah.
Sabah, and the the Kuwait polity.
Mm.
This applies to Jordan, of course. It's very
Of
clear.
course.
The Hashemites and the country came into existence at the same time. Syria was a republic.
Yeah.
And it became hereditary dynastical rule after a huge crime where 30,000 people, more or less, were killed in Hama
Mm.
in February 1982.
Yeah.
So, so it has this fascist potential about it, and it has the threshold to commit massacres is very low. It is very easy to commit massacres, benefiting, by the way, all the time from the ascent, from the growing atmosphere of Islamophobia in the West.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
will not. I have to stop here. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, we don't have to maybe talk so much more about these kind of things. I suppose what people would say is that I mean, people when people talk about this, I suppose they would say that well, Iran and the Hezbollah are the only ones who defended the Palestinians, and therefore we should show them respect. But I think it's
it is not about Palestinians. It is not about Palestinians. It is about giving more weight to Iran and the
mm,
regional and international arena. It is not about the Palestinians. Well, I don't suspect the honesty of many Hezbollah people, but I am talking about a strategy and the
yeah,
political mind. It is not about Palestine. It is not about liberating Palestine.
yeah.
It is not about liberation. It is not about equal rights. You cannot crush the Syrian people and you are defending the rights of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think the Palestinian historian Rashid Khalidi recently has gone
Exactly, exactly.
on interviews saying this exact thing, that it's
Yeah,
not about
yeah,
defending Palestine, it's about, boosting Iran's power.
yeah.
But moving on from that, you mentioned Syria was a republic before, and so I wonder if you would want to say some words about Syria before Assad and I've seen some people th talk about like looking to Syria's past to maybe think about a future. There was a time and a place where there was a kind of a republic and a constitutional system in Syria, parliamentary system. What was that like, and is that maybe a model for the future?
Yeah. Look, Syria appeared in the history of the world only after the First World War, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And soon it fell under the French colonialism with Lebanon,
Hmm.
and the British took Palestine, Palestine and Jordan. These four countries were one, in a way, one uh, political, cultural unity, in a way. They are called in the West, the Levant, we call them Bilad al-Sham in Arabic. And culturally, cuisine wise, the, their dialects in Arabic are close
Yeah,
to each other. And their economy is Mediterranean, agriculture, trees, trade, and centered around cities. Cities like Aleppo, like Damascus, like starting from the 19th century, Beirut, Haifa. Haifa was the port, the seaport of Damascus.
yeah.
Latakia was not almost nothing. It became something only after the independence of Syria in 1946.
Mm.
So the French colonialism lasted for 26 years only, fortunately. And uh, Syria was a republic with free elections, with all expected problems of a newly um, of a very young country. Soon Israel was created, and it was supported by Western powers and the Soviet Union, actually, and the Arabs who tried to help the Palestinians were defeated. So the beginning of Syria was associated with difficulties, not only difficulties of a third world country that should, with all the challenges of national building, economy, education, infrastructure, health, everything, but also geopolitical problems. We are in the Middle East, and the Middle East, you have Britain, you have France. Geographically, they are not, but of course, they politically, systematically, they are there, and the US and the Soviet Union in those days. So it is. So it is jungle. It is a
Mm.
jungle.
Mm.
Still, there was political life. We had Communist Party, not very powerful, but it was something there, and with a level of hegemony on the intellectual level. Arab nationalism, Syria is the cradle of Arab nationalism.
Yeah.
ميشيل عفلق صلاح الدين البيتار زكي الأرسوزي, these people.
Constantine Zorek.
Constantine Zrek, well, Constantine Zrek is Arab nationalist, but he was not Ba'athist.
Yeah.
I mentioned those who were Ba'athists.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, uh, Zaki al-Arsuzi is something a bit different because,
Mm.
yeah. Anyway, but yeah, this generation of intellectuals, academicians, and quite creative, outdated today, of course, understandable, but they were something in their days in 1940s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
But Syria was notorious with its coup d'etat. Many ones, they prevented any tyranny, state tyranny, but they also prevented political stability in the country. And it was, I mean, Look, in the year 1940, a year after the creation of Israel, there were three coups d'etat in the country.
Yeah.
One lasted for hardly 4 months, one for a shorter time, and one sticked for a longer time. Then there was a popular uprising against this third coup, who was led by a guy called Adib Shishakli,
Yeah.
and he fled the country.
Yeah.
So there was not much blood. Actually, there was no blood. It's true that one of the leaders of the first coup was executed. I'm not sure if some of his aides were executed, but it was, if ever, it was just few people. The second leader, the leader of the second coup was assassinated in Beirut. He fled to Beirut. The third was actually would be assassinated years later in Brazil
Mm.
or Argentina. I'm not very sure. So after this uprising in 1954, there was a constituent assembly and elections and free political life, but it was also the heyday of Cold War
Yeah.
and the Americans meddling, and the British and the French were still active. They
Yeah.
would they would become weaker after Suez 1956,
Sure.
but they were still, and we remember it was the days of the Algeria Liberation War.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Syria was part of this situation, not very stable, but with very active life
Yeah.
and not very powerful institutions. So you can say that the level of politicization of the people was overflowing the political institutions, and with a highly politicized army as well. Unfortunately, the army
Right.
was the
Yeah.
source of instability in the country. Late 1958, there was a unity between Syria and Egypt. It was an escape from active political life and active
Yeah.
and political tensions to to a military ruler who was very popular at that time, the Arab world, after the Suez War,
Mm.
Nasser. It didn't work. And 3 years and a half after, there was another coup who toppled the unity regime, and the new free elections and political life with communists, with Baathists, and with the Muslim Brotherhood. Then yet another coup, the Baathists seized power in the morning of March 8, 1963. There were two additional Ba'athist coup in 1966 and 1970, but within the party military complex. And the last 90, that took place on uh, November 16, 1970, lasted for 54 nightmarish years.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, in the memory of Syrians, it will be associated with two civil wars.
Yeah.
One started in late 1970s up to 1982, where there was a huge massacre in Hama with tens of thousands of people killed.
Mm.
And the second that erupted in 2011
Yeah.
and hopefully is over in the last 2 weeks.
Hopefully.
Less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it was it was the problem now. I am afraid of the level of politicization will again overthrow the political institutions. That's why it is very important to build the new political institutions and
Yeah.
to that that we have parties, we have rational political leaderships and active civil society. There are so many initiatives on this level. I hope that we'll show a higher level of wisdom than we we've been known to be. We haven't been that wise. I hope a bigger number of us will show a bit of wisdom.
Yeah, hopefully. I just thought about something when you were mentioning all the different coups d'etats in Syria. If I'm not mistaken, the number of coups d'etats were so many that the word for revolution changed. Uh, I believe that maybe 100 years ago, that when in Arabic you would say revolution, you would say inqilab, and then that word shifted to start to mean coup d'etat, and now we use the word thawra. Is that right?
Well, it is not because of the Syrian coup d'etat. This preceded it. No,
Okay.
it is Arabic was modernized in
Mm.
the the last third of the 19th century. So they were not settled. The words
Yeah.
didn't settle, or the meanings didn't settle comfortably in the vocabulary. I, I believe that it is always the case in all the languages, but Arabic, it was a transitional period where there's an old language that was there for 1,500 years, maybe more,
Yeah.
and for long centuries, there was no active cultural creativity. So this was part of this
Okay.
revival of
Nahda,
Islam.
kind of.
But interestingly, the word inqilab is used in
Iran.
Iran
Yeah.
to mean revolution.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is the same word in Arabic. In Arabic, well, the term came to mean coup d'etat.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, Yassin, I've taken up a lot of your time, but I thought I'd ask you a last question about something that you've written about quite a bit over the years, especially during the Syrian civil war, which is the idea that the world has become Syrianized. Um, could you explain what you meant by that, and if the recent changes in with the fall of Assad, etc., has changed the way you view this concept?
Well, it was to represent the Syrian situation. I said, well, this is a complementary. The world is Syrianized. The main thing was that the world is in Syria. That Syria is a microcosm because we have a lot of the world in Syria. We have the US, we have Russia, we have Iran, we have Turkey, we have Israel, we have jihadis from dozens of countries from Europe, from the whole Muslim world, so many countries in the Muslim world. We have the PKK people from quite a few countries. We have Shia militias from many countries as well.
Mm.
So a lot of the world is in Syria,
Yeah.
while a lot of Syrians were spread in the world.
Right.
7 millions displaced externally, with 1 million, more than 1 million in Europe. Uh, so um, um, Syria became a microcosm of a world that gives you an idea about the world. Syria is not an important country, I would say. It's important for us. It's important for us Syrians because it is the only homeland we have. But it's a mediocre country and not rich, not. with nothing very big about it. I think we have a big story now, but I don't know what will we do with it. I mean, all relies on what we'll do with this big story. Anyway, so the idea that the world is Syrianized came in this context. I saw actually that starting from 2012, especially 2013, the world became less humane and uh, um, especially after the chemical massacre in August 2013, and then the chemical deal between the Americans and the Russians, which was far a far bigger crime than the chemical massacre itself, in my opinion. And I said this
Mm.
several times. So the world Syrianized because it became like the Assad Syria,
Yeah.
as if Bashar al-Assad was ruling the world. So it became, I mean, when the Syrian revolution started, the hope was that we come closer to an international standard of some rights, some political life. Now, what happened is that the world became a place with less rights and with less political life and with investment everywhere in the world in a fascist with a necktie
Yeah.
because the whole world started to tremble before the fascists with shaggy birds. So they choose democracies in the world, liberal democracies in the world. The Russians, the Chinese, everybody in the world chose for us a fascist with a necktie and with chemical weapons and with bulb bombs. It's okay to kill them, those who were reduced to this shaggy bird. And also they consented that we have Sudnaya prison.
Yeah.
So it is a Syrianized world. It
Yeah.
is the strategic depth and the ethical or unethical depth of the Assad regime.
Yeah.
I think this story should be written someday as well. It is part of our huge story.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess we should hope for Syria now becoming a more positive model for the world, and maybe the world being Syrianized can mean something positive in the future. But for now, I'd like to thank you so much, Yassin al-Haj Saleh, for joining us today on Kalam Podcast. It was an honor to speak to you.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you. I hope this has been useful, and I hope listeners will forgive um, uh, my fits of um, anger. I mean, I just
Oh,
cannot help it. What has happened in Syria and for Syrians is big, and it has obliterated the lives of so many people.
yeah,
I hope it's good that we haven't fully lost our minds.
yeah. I think the anger is justified, but I think that there's a chance now for something positive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edgar.